Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of stories. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 500 likes on this one. Liking the video helps push the video in the algorithm. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as there is content just like this all over this channel. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I've always been drawn to the dark corners of the internet. Not the dark web, just obscure websites and blogs with next to no users. That's how I stumbled upon the 13th floor ritual. It was just a post on an obscure forum, but it promised an experience beyond anything imaginable. A glimpse into a world that defied explanation, with the promise of good fortune for those who followed the ritual steps correctly. I've archived the post, and while I won't link it here at this time, it reads as follows. Greetings. Below you will find instructions on how to perform the 13th floor ritual. They say if you perform the ritual correctly, you'll have good fortune, but at a cost. Some claim they've seen the other side while others have vanished without a trace. So, who's brave enough to try? 1. Find a building with at least 13 floors. It must have an elevator that can access all floors without restrictions. 2. Begin the ritual at 1 in the morning. This is 1 hour past midnight, also known as the true 13th hour. 3. Enter the elevator alone. If anyone else gets on, you must wait and start over. 4. Press the buttons in ascending order, starting with 1 all the way through 13, stopping on each floor. You must not proceed if the elevator stops on any floor where you did not press a button. 5. When you reach the 13th floor, the doors will open to a hallway that doesn't exist in our realm. You may see figures in the distance. Do not, for any reason, interact with them or show fear. 6. Leave an object of personal significance in the hallway. The greater the significance, the greater the fortune. This is your offering. 7. Return to the elevator and do not for any reason turn around. Press the button for the first floor. If the elevator begins ascending instead, immediately press any other floor's button to disrupt the ascent. 8. Exit the building immediately after reaching the first floor. Do not look back. Do not go back. Ever. If you've made it past the final step, congratulations. You may now begin to experience good fortune. You can thank me later. Regards. M. After reading this, I called up my buddy, who I will refer to as Steve in this story for the sake of anonymity. Steve and I go way back, and both of us have enjoyed trying outlandish internet ceremonies in order to document the results. It's a sort of hobby we have shared since middle school. Everything we had ever done before this had, unsurprisingly, ended in disappointing results. Which is why it was no surprise when Steve initially declined my invitation to join me on this particular excursion. Nah, man, I don't think so. I mean, thanks for the offer, but Kristen's mom's visiting from Vermont this weekend, and she needs me to help move some furniture to get her apartment ready, he told me. Plus, the post you sent says that only one person is allowed to perform the ritual, and it's not like anything ever happens anyway. Of course nothing happens, I chuckled in reply. But the fun is the experience. Come on, man. There's no way I'm going into an old building at night by myself. You can just use the stairs to meet me at each floor. I don't know, man. That furniture. Nobody moves furniture at night, Steve. You just don't want Kristen's mom to find out about your little hobby. Isn't that it? Maybe. Steve sighed. I could hear the hesitation in his voice. I knew I had him. Come on, Steve. We both will be going off to college in the fall. We gotta have at least one last adventure before then. Man, Kristen really has turned you into a scaredy cat. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Steve relented. Alright, fine. But if we get caught, I'm telling the police you were holding me hostage. Deal, I said with a grin. I'll pick you up at 11 tonight. We set out to find a building tall enough, old enough, and most importantly, abandoned enough to perform the ritual. It took longer than we expected, and it was already 12:40 when we settled on what building to use. After a bit of back and forth between me and Steve, we decided on the Markham building. It was an old, worn-out, 18th floor structure originally built in the 1930s, when Art Deco architecture was still a thing. It's mostly unused nowadays, save for the first floor, which I believe operates as an insurance office during the morning hours. Though, don't quote me on that. The rest of the building hadn't been leased out since the 90s. We parked a few blocks away from the Markham building to avoid drawing any unwanted attention. The streets were eerily quiet, the only sounds being the distant hum of traffic and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. As we approached the building, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The Markham building loomed over us. I imagine it must have been one of the tallest, grandest buildings in the area during its time, but it was now marred by years of neglect and decay. Steve and I had anticipated that entering the building might pose a bit of a challenge, as the first floor was at least still in partial use, but this hadn't stopped us from getting into other, similar locations in the past, though this would be the biggest building we'd ever forced our way into. We could see through the glass doors at the entrance that the first floor was still illuminated, as if someone might still be inside. I pushed gently on the door, and to our surprise it gave easily, swinging open with no effort at all. Steve and I glanced at each other in a mixture of surprise, excitement, and nervousness. Steve quickly put his lock-picking tools back into his front pocket. We had been kind of worried about being seen by any cameras inside, but now that the door hadn't been locked, we were no longer very concerned with being charged with unlawful entry. As for all we knew, the building was still open. In fact, we were now more concerned about running into an employee who might question us and what we were up to. Cautiously, we made our way through the entrance, past the empty receptionist desk, and into the main lobby. It wasn't fancy, in fact it was rather dingy and also appeared not to have seen any improvements made to it since the mid-80s, when the building had last been renovated. What stood out in contrast to this, however, was the large, shiny, new silver elevator located on the far side of the room. Half expecting someone to come up from behind, we hastily made our way over to the elevator's metallic doors. "Why is it so new?" asked Steve, holding the flashlight I had given him, though it was currently pointless. "I don't know," I shrugged. "I guess Wikipedia was wrong and this place has been renovated pretty recently. Heck, maybe even the other floors aren't abandoned either." Steve didn't reply, but the uneasiness in his face was very easy for me to read. The instructions were clear. At 1 hour past midnight, I was to enter the elevator alone, visit floors in a specific order, and never, under any circumstances, look back once the elevator reached the 13th floor. "Remember, you have to take the stairs and meet me on each floor," I reminded Steve. Yeah, I got it," he replied, rolling his eyes. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the first floor. As the doors closed, I could hear the faint sound of Steve's footsteps as he made his way to the stairwell. The elevator began its ascent, and as it did so, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I found myself glancing nervously at the mirror, half expecting to see a shadowy figure lurking behind me. But of course there was nothing. Just my own rather pale reflection staring back at me. When the doors finally opened on the first floor, I was relieved to see Steve waiting for me. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. "Yeah, just feeling a bit creeped out in there," I admitted. "Let's keep going." I pressed the button for the second floor. The doors closed and the elevator continued its journey. We repeated this process, following the sequence of buttons outlined in the ritual. Each time the elevator stopped, I was greeted by Steve. He was always able to get to the next floor ahead of me, as the elevator took around an extra 20 seconds in the process of opening and closing its doors. I was also careful to never step out or for him to step in. I didn't want to do anything that could potentially force us to start over. We continued, floor by floor, until I reached the 12th floor. As the doors opened, I fully expected Steve to already be there, waiting for me, as he had been on all the other floors. But there was nobody there, just a dark, abandoned office hallway. I didn't want to admit it to myself at the time, but I was scared. "Steve?" I called out softly, and as I did so, that feeling of being watched intensified. I could hear my heart beating loudly in my ears, and for a moment that prevented me from hearing something else. Eventually I breathed a sigh of relief when I realized that I could hear Steve's footsteps echoing in the stairwell. We must have already started heading up to the 13th floor. I took a deep breath and pressed the button for the 13th floor. The elevator doors closed with a soft thud, and despite knowing deep down that this ritual was just a prank post by some internet goof, I felt a shiver run down my spine. To me, the ascent felt slower this time, like the elevator itself was reluctant to reach its destination. When the doors finally opened, I was greeted by pitch blackness. The other floors had been dark, sure, but even then there had still been some light coming through the large glass windows that lined some of the walls. My heart was beating quickly as I flicked on my flashlight to see what was ahead of me. Even though I was scared, part of me felt disappointed when all I saw was a hallway that looked completely normal for an abandoned building. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, and the floor was covered in a worn-out carpet. There were many desk chairs stacked on top of one another in a corner, and a trash bin that appeared to be filled with paper, but otherwise, there was little else to see in the hallway. It was eerily quiet, and the only sound was the faint hum of the elevator behind me. I stepped out of the elevator, my heart resuming a more slowed and steady beat. I glanced around, again expecting to see Steve waiting for me, but the hallway was empty. I took a few cautious steps forward, my eyes scanning the area for any sign of movement. The air felt heavy, and there was still that lingering, unshakable feeling that something was there watching me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my grandfather's old watch. It had been given to me as a birthday gift from him 3 days before he was killed in a car accident. I had brought it with me as my offering, hoping that its significance to me would be enough to satisfy whatever forces were behind the granting of good luck that the forum poster had alluded to. I placed the watch on the floor, beside the trash bin. I'd come back to get it next weekend, I told myself. As I turned to head back to the elevator, I froze dead in my tracks. It was gone. The elevator was gone. I know this sounds insane, and believe me, that's exactly how I felt in that moment. But the elevator was gone. In its place was a blank wall, as if the elevator had never existed. Panic surged through me and I spun around, searching for any sign of an exit. The hallway stretched out before me, seemingly endless and devoid of any exits or windows. "Steve?" I called out, my voice echoing down the empty hallway. There was no response. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "Steve?" I shouted louder this time. Still no response. I hesitated, trying to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I needed to think logically, to come up with a plan. If the elevator was gone, then my only option was to find another way out, and that meant exploring the rest of the 13th floor. I hated the idea of that, but what else could I do? I continued down the hallway. My flashlight was quite literally the only source of light. The air grew colder with each step, and the silence was, for lack of a better word, oppressive, as if it were trying to smother me. I called out for Steve again, but there was no reply, just the echo of my own voice bouncing off the walls. I felt a growing sense of dread, a feeling that I was not alone. As I ventured further, the hallway began to change. The faded wallpaper peeled away to reveal old, cracked plaster. The carpet disintegrated under my feet, leaving a trail of dust and debris. The chairs that had formerly been stacked neatly were now strewn all across the floor. And then I saw them, the figures. They were distant at first, pretty much just shadows at the edge of my flashlight's reach. But as I moved closer, they became clearer. They were tall, impossibly thin, and completely still. I remembered the warning from the post. Do not interact with them or show fear. But how could I not be afraid? They were like nothing I had ever seen, and their presence filled me with an instinctual terror. I have never felt that level of intense dread before in my life. I don't know how to accurately describe it. Suddenly, I heard a cry. It was desperate and pleading, and the voice was all too familiar. Help me. It was Steve's voice coming from somewhere ahead. Without thinking, I started running towards the figures and the sound of Steve's voice. I knew I was breaking the rules of the ritual, but I didn't care. Steve was my friend, and he needed me. As I approached the figures, they turned to face me. Their eye sockets seemed to be empty voids, and their toothless mouths were wide open, almost as if they were screaming, but they made no sound at all. I reached out to them, begging for help. I don't know why I did that. It seems so stupid now, but I was desperate, and probably in some sort of state of shock, to be honest. They did not respond. They simply stood there, watching me as Steve's cries grew fainter and fainter until they were gone entirely. Then I was alone again, surrounded by the figures. I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my side, and I realized I had injured myself somehow. It felt like I had hurt myself falling, but I know that I hadn't done that. I sank to the ground in agony for a moment as the figures watched me silently. I could feel my heartbeat pulsing in my head, but I was somehow able to muster the strength to struggle to my feet, despite the pain searing through me. I had to get back to the elevator. I had to escape this nightmare. I stumbled back the way I had come. The figures did not interfere with me. In fact, they seemingly parted to let me pass. When I reached the spot where the elevator should have been, to my amazement it was there, as if it had never left. I didn't hesitate. I pressed the button for the first floor and collapsed inside as the doors closed, slumping against the wall, my energy spent. That's when I felt the elevator begin to ascend. Panic gripped me once again. This wasn't right. The building only had 18 floors, yet it was already past floor 30 and was still climbing and accelerating. I struggled to sit up and reached for the keypad. My vision blurred, my fingers fumbled, but I managed to press another button. I think it was floor 1, but I could barely see, so I'm not even sure. The lift jolted, then began its descent. When the elevator finally stopped, I braced myself for what I might find, but when the doors opened, I saw that I was on the first floor. with everything as it had been before, except now the lights were off. Gasping for air, I crawled out of the elevator, my body screaming in protest. I had to get outside to find help, but I was so weak and tired that I didn't think I could make it. I couldn't push open the glass door to escape. And then, by some miracle, a car drove by and saw me. A stranger rushed to my side, their voice echoing distantly as they called for help. I awoke the next morning in the hospital. The sunlight beaming into the sterile white room was a welcome sight after the darkness of the Markham building. I sat up, feeling a sharp pain in my side. I glanced around the room, wondered what had happened. The events of last night felt so distant that I began to believe they must have all been a feverish dream. Perhaps I had gotten into a car accident. Just as I had started to convince myself of this narrative, I noticed it, my grandfather's watch, sitting on the table beside my bed. Its hands frozen at 1, the true 13th hour. I felt the pit of my stomach drop. Was it really all real? How did the watch get there? What had happened to Steve? I had to find out. Desperate for answers, I returned to the forum where I had found the ritual. I posted about my experiences, hoping someone could help me. The responses, what few there were a mix of skepticism and concern, but one message stood out. It was from a user named M, the same person who had posted the ritual. Congratulations, the message read. You've seen the other side, but remember, good fortune comes at a cost. The figures you saw are now aware of you, and they will not rest until they have what they want. Be careful, and whatever you do, do not perform the ritual again. I realized then with a sinking feeling that Steve must have been the object of importance that I left on the 13th floor. I had meant to leave my grandfather's watch, but somehow I had accidentally left Steve instead. So that's where I'm at right now. I don't expect any of you to believe me, obviously. Heck, I don't even know if I completely believe it myself. I've tried calling Steve hundreds of times now to no avail. Kristen, Steve's girlfriend, keeps texting me, asking where he is. I don't know how to break the story to her. I do know, though, that I have to go back to that building. I have to perform the ritual again. I can't leave Steve there. I got him into this mess, and I have to be the one to get him out. The doctors say that I have to stay here overnight at the very least, but I can't wait that long. I'm just waiting for 11 tonight, when I can sneak out of here with just enough time to get back to the Markham building by 1. I know this is just a forum to post stories that are preventing you from getting any sleep. But if any of you have any genuine advice on what to do or how to get help, please let me know as soon as you can. I only have 13 hours left before I have to go. Can someone please help me understand this? I'm trying to make sense of what he wrote, but I just can't. Through the tears and fear of losing him, I can't understand any of this. I want to go and check for myself what happened, but I am too scared to take our young son with me. Please, help. I can feel it preying on me. I can hear it pacing around right outside of my bedroom door. I don't know what I did to deserve this. I have so much to live for. My wife and child are back home. God, I will never be able to see my son grow. To teach him baseball or football. To teach him how to drive and, hopefully, to make him love cars as much as I do. To see him graduate and become such a talented professional that I know he will be. My dear Angela, I'm sorry I won't be there for you. I'm sorry I won't be there for you when you need me the most. I promised that we would be together for eternity, and we will be. I will always be watching over you and Tom. I hope you can somehow feel me and forgive me. Please love our son for both of us. Move on with your life. Find yourself a new partner to cherish happy moments with. Someone good for you and Tom. Good like I was never able to be. Hopefully. You won't forget me, but if you do, that's okay. It won't change my feelings for you. I'm sorry I never told you this, but how could I? Would you even be with me if you knew? Would you even believe me? Maybe, I don't know. But that's my burden to carry and mine only. I am a farmer, and all of the rumors you heard about my family, all of those you shrugged and defended me from those people, they are all true. We indeed are one of the wealthiest families around, but that came with a price. Many years ago, my great-grandfather, living in misery and poverty, hunger, his children dying from it, he found a way out of it. In one of his jobs as a gardener, he went to a secluded mansion in the middle of the forest. There he met someone he called his savior. A couple of months after working there, he struck gold. He never told his family how, but he suddenly became filthy rich. But it changed him. He became a mean, cruel man. He would hire desperate immigrants, those who had no family around here, and would treat them like trash. He would constantly starve them, beat them, torture them. He had his little torture chamber hidden underground of his enormous land. So many people died there in horrific ways. As he grew old, little by little, he wasn't capable of doing such horrific things anymore, and it seemed to affect him. The less of a torturer he could be, the more sick and debilitated he became. He had one son left, and only one who survived the famine and poverty. Jeff. Jeff was the opposite of him. Jeff was kind, worked charity at the church, donated food, and built houses for the poor. He had no idea of what his father was, but after his father's death, Jeff became colder and colder as the days passed. The workers at their farm were relieved when his father died, but it didn't last long. Shortly after, Jeff started giving them less and less food. He started hurting them a little here and there, a punch, a kick, but suddenly the tortures once again resumed. Jeff, my grandfather, had a son, Thomas. My beloved father. Thomas was nothing like Jeff or my great-grandfather. I grew up on that house with him and Jeff. My mother left us when I was 2 years old. I think I can now understand why. I think you remember. How could you not? What happened last year? My dad, who was caring for my grandfather, offed himself. I couldn't understand why. He was so full of life, so excited to see his grandchildren growing. But he did, and he left Jeff, bedbound, for me to care for. I never liked the man, but I couldn't leave him to die. So we moved to this godforsaken town so we could live near Jeff. Little by little, I was creeped out more and more by him. He would say things like it was my destiny to become it, and that was our family's legacy. I thought he was going insane. One day I was exploring the vast mansion, and I found my dad's room. It was eerie and creepy to see his photos. Our photos. Just there, gathering dust. I should have been more present in his life after I left for college and work. There, sitting on his bed, was a weird old book. At first glance I thought nothing of it, but naturally I was curious. Once I started reading, I noticed it wasn't a book, but rather a diary, one that belonged to my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather made a deal with something he couldn't even name. It granted us a great fortune in exchange for a vessel. What he didn't know was what that meant. You see, when the vessel grows old and is incapable of causing suffering, it craves for a younger one. That's how Jeff became the monster he was, which I only found out reading this kind of diary. It looks like the creature keeps logs of all of his vessel's life. At least he did on my great-grandfather and Jeff's. On the last few pages, the handwriting was different. I recognized it as my father's. Slowly he narrated how, after finding that, he would see old things around the house, a shadow here and there, the book appearing in random weird places, but places where he was. In the kitchen cabinet when he was reaching for some food, on the bathroom sink when he went for a shower, on his closet, his dresser, on and on. He would hear random sounds at night outside of his room, like someone was impatiently pacing right outside of his bed. It tried to open the door every night, but it was locked. The thing would never say anything, just pace around, but he knew what he wanted. That's why my dad did what he did, to end the curse. But it didn't end, it just delayed it. Right now I can hear it pacing around, violently shaking the knob, pounding at the door. It must be very close to death. Jeff's death, I mean. And it needs my body, my mind, my vessel. But I know how to end this. At least I hope so, for the sake of our son. During the day I soaked the whole house in gasoline. I locked my room and waited for the thing to come out. I know it can sense what I am about to do, and that must be why it is also impatient and, dare I say, desperate. This is my last email to you, Angela. Please remember me not as a freak, but rather as your loving husband. Tell our best memories to our son so he can grow up knowing the best part of me. That's all I ask. I love you both. To be honest, I wasn't sure that the advice sub would let me post this there, so I'm posting it here because it's so messed up. And it didn't seem right for Let's Not Meet either. But I do need advice, because I feel like I'm losing my mind. So I, 30 female, have always been very close to my cousin, also 30 female. Let's call her Angela. Because we're the same age, our parents, my mom and her father, are siblings. Went through all the same stages with us, and as such, we were more or less raised like siblings due to how much time our families spent together. We even had homes in the country in the same township, which is where I think this happened. And I can't really tell my family because it will make me sound legitimately crazy. And some part of me even doubts this memory, but at the same time, I know in my heart that it's true. It's a complicated feeling, and this memory was brought to light last week when my suspicion I've had for years was more or less confirmed. One winter, 16 years ago, when Angela and I were both 14, both of our families were at our cottages, a 20-minute drive from each other. Angela and her little brother, my cousin, let's call him James, parents, my aunt and uncle, were going skiing one morning, and I wanted to go too. So I spent the night at their cottage, like I often did when we all went up north. Angela's bedroom had 2 single beds in it, and James' room was down the hall. The whole house was open concept, so the hall from Angela's room to James' room did not have walls, but rather was bordered by 2 railings over which you could see down into the main floor, the open concept living and dining rooms. James is 4 years younger than us, and when he was 10, he was such a typical little boy / little brother. It's almost cartoonish to look back on, like, I'm talking constantly bothering us. putting a stink bomb on a remote control car that he would sneak into our rooms, trying to read Angela's diary when we weren't in her bedroom. Just all the stuff, but never anything cruel or out of the ordinary or sinister. Just a massive handful. The basement of James and Angela's cottage was filled with storage and old toys, and sometimes, on the rare occasion, that we'd willingly play with James, we'd all go down to the basement and try to freak each other out. Anyway, one of the toys in the basement was your typical Raggedy Ann doll from the 60s or something. I think it belonged to my uncle when he was a kid, and then Angela when she was a baby. Her name was Trilly. I forget who named it. Anyway, I have vague memories of playing with it when we were younger, and pretending it was our third cousin or our little daughter. But since then, she'd sat in storage in the basement. But what great nightmare material, right? A creepy, limp, smiling doll. So the night I stayed over, before we went skiing in the morning, James, Angela, and I were up to our playing in the basement. And I remember we tried to freak James out by pretending Trilly was alive or something like that. Whatever. Game over. We all had dinner with our parents, then watched a movie as a family and went to bed. James to his room, and Angela and me to Angela's room. Now, this is the thing. Angela and I still joke about this night, and she remembers it just like I do, which is why I sort of wrote off my hypothesis until last week. That night, in the middle of the night, I started tossing and turning. I woke up and could tell that Angela was stirring as well. One of us said to the other, "Are you awake?" And the other said, "Yes." And we realized that we both couldn't sleep, or were woken up by the same thing, or were both just feeling restless. But then at the other end of her room, Trilly was sitting in the desk chair. I think it was Angela who pointed it out. We saw a shadow, thinking it was a person, freaked out, and then relaxed briefly when we saw it was just a doll. But then we got freaked out all over again and were like, "Why is this doll in your room?" Murderously standing up and going over to it to pick it up and throw it in James' room and pound the living Christ out of him. We turn on all the lights, turn on the hall light, stomp down the hall into his room and turn on his lights, and see he's not in his bed. We then go downstairs. My aunt and uncle's room was on the main floor, Trilly still in Angela's hands, and here my aunt and James in the washroom. Turns out James had been sick for the last few hours, and my aunt had been up all night with him as he was throwing up in the washroom. And when we saw the scene, we immediately could tell that James had nothing to do with Trilly. Like, it was just one of those really believable situations where we could tell James truly had no idea what was going on. We even felt bad for him. And to top it off, when we told him the story in the morning, it scared him so much that he didn't go into the basement for like a year. Anyway, it seemed really sincere. So Angela and I went back to her room and we were like, "Are we sure we didn't bring this up here last night? Are we sure? We must have." Anyway, while we were really freaked, we figured that it was explainable. We knew the doll obviously didn't walk itself upstairs like it was some horror movie, but because we were 14 and all for the drama, and I remember us having the better safe than sorry mindset, we called our dog upstairs. Bella, a poorly behaved black poodle. We started playing tug of war with Bella, using Trilly as the toy, and eventually Bella ripped her to shreds. Anyway, funny memory. Making the dog rip up the doll. We laughed and thought we were tough and cool. Then we went back to bed. The next morning, instead of all of us going skiing, it was just me, Angela, and my uncle, because James stayed home with my aunt on account of his stomach flu. But when we woke up, Angela was acting weird. Nothing too notable, just really bizarrely quiet as she moved around her room to get her clothes out of her drawers and get changed. She didn't, acknowledge me in her room. I said something like, "Morning," when she didn't acknowledge me, and she looked at me and then turned back to her drawers and kept getting changed. And she was looking around weirdly. I remember that too. Almost like she'd misplaced something, but a little more dazed than that, just moving strangely. Then she went downstairs without saying anything to me at all. I thought maybe she was just super groggy, but it still felt really weird. When I went downstairs, she was standing at the island in the kitchen buttering toast that my uncle had put in for us. I distinctly remember walking up beside her and to the toaster, pulling a piece of toast out of it, putting it on the plate that had been set out for me. And when I dipped the knife into the container of butter, Angela smacked my hand away, hard, and looked at me and snapped, "What are you doing? Don't take things that aren't yours." I was shocked. It honestly felt like being struck in the face. She'd never spoken to me like that before. And even though we were like siblings, I still felt that kind of mortifying embarrassment you feel when someone calls you out on misbehaving, even though I wasn't doing anything wrong. But it was her family's butter and bread. I don't know. That's what I remember thinking. But it was awkward and weird, and I just said, what? And then she didn't say anything, just kept buttering her toast, and I mumbled some apology. The three of us then drove to the ski hill, and I kid you not, Angela and I didn't speak the whole way there. I had no idea what was up, but I didn't want to ask with her dad in the car. Then when we got to the ski hill, we went skiing just the two of us, and on the chairlift during the first run I mustered up the courage to say, "Hey, did I do something wrong? I feel like you're really mad at me or something." And she turned to look at me and was confused. Not friendly, not warm, not reassuring, but confused. It was almost as if I was a stranger, and she looked at me as if to say, "Sorry, who are you? Why are you talking to me?" And she responded in a formal way, "Sorry, I have no idea what you're talking about." The distance in her voice was really eerie, and I started to think maybe this had to do with the doll incident the night before, and either she was trying to extend the prank, and she was the one who had put the doll on the chair, or she felt guilty that we ruined the family doll, and she resented me for being a part of it. Anyway, when we got to the top of the hill, she skied down quietly and didn't wait for me to go back up again, and we ended up skiing separately. I felt awkward and embarrassed, like I'd done something wrong. I ended up skiing with my uncle, who asked me what was up with us, and I just said I didn't know. Then after our day of skiing, he dropped me off at my family's cottage and continued on home with Angela. For the rest of that whole school year, we were in 9th grade, Angela and I didn't really speak. It was really sad. We were like sisters before, but better because we weren't actually sisters, but cousins. And so we were like best friends that were related. Seriously, we were really close, and it really messed me up. I felt like she just ghosted me. I would text her and call her house, but she was always fine or with Jessica, her best friend. I chalked it up to her just outgrowing me, and it really sucked. But to be honest, it was so jarring and such a stark shift that I was more confused than hurt. I talked to my mom about it, and she explained to me how rough it can be to be a teenage girl. But that following summer, we were up at our cottages again, and our family had a barbecue and invited over my aunt and uncle and Angela and James. I had seen Angela at family things a couple of times since, and she would just kind of ignore me and spend the whole time texting. Which is what I expected this time. Sure enough, that's what happened for the first bit of the barbecue, but then when the food was ready, she came up beside me as we were dressing our hamburgers at the condiment table and said, Oh my god. Remember that night we got Bella to ruin Trilly? And I was so shocked by her friendly tone, by her acting as though she were picking up a conversation we were just having, that I just stared at her and said, "Yeah, that was crazy." And she said, "Yeah, so funny. Anyway, how have you been?" Again, really different and formal. I almost couldn't get past how altered her tone was, like we'd never even met. In fact, she seemed so sprightly and kind that I thought she was mocking me. And our relationship since that barbecue carried on just like that. She started talking to me more, but I'd reference inside jokes or ways we used to be, or things we used to do, and she never really latched on to any of them. I was caught between thinking she'd outgrown me, and thinking she was like embarrassed of our closeness before or something, and was trying to move on. I talked to my mom about this, and again got the speech about how teenage girls can be really cruel and strange sometimes. So, until we were about 22, we were like that, nice to each other, talking sometimes, not that close. And I learned to not try and act like we were all close or that we had been close. I talked to my friends about it too, and they said it was normal for friendships to change like that. But something felt off about this. I started to honestly feel crazy for hanging on to this before memory of Angela so much. Then when we were 22, we grew apart. This time it was mutual and natural. I moved cities and she got engaged and became a real estate agent, and we just had nothing to talk about. It was gradual and I didn't notice it much, which brings us to 8 years later, just last week. I was traveling in Iceland. I had to be there, very randomly, for a conference/workshop I was leading for work, and turned it into a vacation. Rented a car, decided I was going to drive across the island after the conference was over, and stay on the east part and explore a bit. Day 4 of my 7-day-long road trip. It's mid-afternoon. I'm hungry. I've been driving for 3 hours and have come across no sign of civilization at all, and it was 50 miles to the next town. But then, voila, a little gas station/general store/cafe. Perfect. I can't believe I'm writing this. It makes me sound crazy, but here I go. I park in the little 3-car parking lot. I get out of my car, step onto the gravel. The sky is white, expansive. There are mountains everywhere around me, fields, sheep. The air is fresh. Seriously, middle of nowhere. I walk up the wooden rickety steps and push open the door and hear the door chimes go. A man walks out from the back room and greets me, and the place is cute. There's a little handwritten menu above the cash register, and I asked him in my pathetic Icelandic/English mix if I could have the gravlax toast. He's very friendly and kind and says yes. Asks if I want a coffee. I say yes please, blah blah. He rings me up at the cash register, and I go and sit at the one table they have and wait for my food. I look around. It's mostly a fishing supplies store with some general groceries. The man opens the door to the room from which he came, the kitchen I suppose, and says the order to the lady in the back who looks like she's doing some prep cooking. Immediately I stop. It's fricking Angela. Or I thought it was. Now remember, I hadn't seen Angela in about 8 years, since her dad passed away when we were 23. And because I'd moved cities, we just had no reason to really see each other, especially after growing so far apart. So, like, it's Angela. She's working at a random general store in the middle of nowhere, Iceland. But, wait. I thought, no. This is obviously not Angela. Angela is a real estate agent in my hometown. I'd obviously know if she lived in Iceland, right? I don't really use social media, but the odd time I do, she'll pop up here and there. but I guess not enough for me to confirm she still lived in my hometown. But anyway, she looked enough like Angela that I went right up to the cash register and rang the little bell, and the guy came back out, and when he opened the door I was able to get another look at her, and my heart skidded. A chill spread across my crown. It was 100% Angela, like my full-on cousin. So, looking over the guy's shoulder, right at Angela, I smile and say, "Angela, oh my god." And before she could respond, the door shut again. And the guy at the cash smiled really big, a nice, friendly smile, and he looked surprised as well, and pointed back over his shoulder and then at me, as if to say, "You two know each other?" Which confirmed for me that her name was Angela, because he seemed really delighted at the coincidence. Expecting her to emerge from the kitchen, I walked around to behind the cash register. The invitation was implied by the guy, and he put his arm back to open the door for me, or for Angela, whom we both expected to be making her way over to me too. When he opened the door, she was head down again, chopping vegetables. I walked through the door and said, "Angela? Angela!" Smiling, thinking she hadn't seen me yet, or realized who I was, all context considered. She looked up at me, and then quickly, as though avoiding my eyes, looked down. "Hey," she said quietly at the cutting board. What was going on? Before I could ask anything, she said, "I'm really sorry, okay?" "What?" She repeated herself and then continued, "I'm really sorry, okay? But we can't talk." I actually, had no clue what was happening. I was looking into the eyes of my cousin, whom I hadn't seen in forever, in some random shack in Iceland, and she was acting skittish and afraid. I opened my mouth to protest, and she said, "I need you to leave." Then she called the guy's name and said something to him in Icelandic. She can speak Icelandic? The guy came in, his demeanor totally different, almost like he was a bouncer. He gestured to my coffee and toast that were ready to go, took them in his hands and ushered me out of the kitchen, and I could tell I no longer was welcome. Either I wasn't welcome or I was in danger, or both. It felt more like the former, and I don't think the guy had any idea what was going on either. I think she must have said something to him like, "I don't know this person is crazy," or something. That's how he was acting toward me. I got in my car, I drove 5 minutes down the road and pulled over. I miraculously had service, and I called my mom and told her everything. She kind of just laughed at me and was like, "Mini patient 2894, that obviously wasn't Angela," and joked about me making some poor Icelandic woman feel extremely weird. But based off the guy's reaction when I said her name was Angela. And the way she spoke to me and said sorry and said we couldn't talk, she knew me too. I told my mom all of this and I sounded crazy, and she just was basically like, "Haha, yeah, weird." I think she thinks I was making up the part about the apology. I told all of my friends this when I was still in Iceland, and they all reacted like my mom did. At this point, I had 4 days left in the country, and I kept wanting to return to the cafe/general store, but I didn't. I started to think maybe the woman thought I was someone else. But then I kept coming back to, but wait, this person was Angela. Her name, her body, her face, I just didn't know what to do. This brings me to 2 days ago, the day before yesterday, when I returned to Canada, where I live. It's 8 o'clock in the morning and I'm on my way to work. In my car, just picked up a coffee. Exhausted, not thinking about Angela at all. Thinking about my laundry, my bills, what I'm going to make for dinner. The traffic is bad and it's a miserable day outside. My phone dings. It's a random number. The text reads, "Hey, it's Angela. How was your trip?" Haven't heard from her in 8 years, except for our run-in in Iceland, if indeed it was one. No, how have you been? No, I miss you. No, long time no talk. I also hadn't posted anything about my trip on social media. Unless you were a friend of mine, you didn't know I was there. I immediately call my mom, who follows Angela on Instagram, and ask her to look at her profile. Sure enough, Angela, not at all to my mother's surprise, is posting stories of the bachelorette party she's at in Miami. She's like, not at all in Iceland. I have no idea what's going on, and the way Angela / the woman spoke to me in the cafe had the cadence and softness that Angela had, and in my memory, lost, starting the morning of the skiing after the incident with Trilly and the dog. For some reason I'm fully back there in my memory now, realizing that that was the first morning of the new Angela, the one that seemed to have no emotional memory of me at all. Like, the Iceland Angela seemed more like the before Angela. I haven't replied to the text. I have no idea if it was a bachelorette party Miami Angela or Iceland Angela that sent me the message. The area code is from neither Angela's hometown or Iceland. I need advice. I have no idea what to do or who to talk to. Do I reply to the text? What do I say? I feel like the real Angela is trapped in Iceland or something, and has been for a long time. Or I don't even know. I have no idea what to do. Your girlfriend's here. My brother and roommate called from across the house in an obnoxious tone. I didn't feel like getting up to see what he was talking about. I didn't have a girlfriend. My social anxiety wouldn't allow it. With an exasperated sigh, I got off the couch. What are you talking about? Who's at the... My brain froze. She was standing there. Her. Rachel. The girl. She had barely changed. She still had those big brown eyes that had pulled me in a decade ago. She was as beautiful as the last time I had seen her. Oh, God. No. The memories came rushing back. The memories I had spent years repressing. I had all but convinced myself that night never happened. I had been a freshman in college, away from everyone I knew for the first time. Making friends wasn't easy, but I was far from a loner. Rachel and I had some class together. I don't remember what it was for. We were bored and swapped each other's Snapchat IDs. We talked occasionally over the next few weeks, commenting on each other's stories and stuff. Then, kind of out of the blue, she asked if I wanted to come over her place. Her and some friends were having a movie night. Heck yeah, I replied with a smiley emoji. Awesome. We plan on watching the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. Pull an all-nighter, but you know how that's probably gonna go. At the time, I would have barely considered us friends, but if she wanted to explore things past that, I was totally cool with the idea. She was fun, kind, and really pretty. The night came, and sure enough, the living room floor in the house her and her friends were renting was covered in mattresses. She greeted me with a hug. It was nice. I think that was the first time we had any sort of physical contact. After some introductions to the people already there, we settled down to watch the movie. It's funny what your brain locks onto. It went to hell right after the troll is killed. 3 guys and a girl abruptly stood and started walking backwards until they were each against opposing walls. Their eyes were blank, almost clouded over. Rachel was standing in the hallway. The white claw she was holding fell to the floor, but she didn't seem to notice. Her eyes were wide. She glanced at me for just a moment. A few people kind of chuckled nervously. The room had a weird tension to it. Like we all knew something wasn't right, but we didn't know what to do about it. Each of the four took off their shirts. They threw them to the side, never blinking those awful eyes. Energy was surging through me. I needed to go. I needed out. The girl next to me screamed. I turned to see the chest of the guy standing nearest her bulging. His skin split up the center, revealing writhing mass inside him. Others began to scream and stand. All of the four who stood glassy-eyed now had gaping chest cavities, with a wet, squelched tentacle like appendages bursting out from them. My heart skipped a beat, leaving me gasping painfully for breath. The girl next to me was lifted from where she sat and pulled towards the nearest tentacle monster. I didn't help her. I didn't help anyone. Others tried running but were snatched up and entangled in those wet, dark green arms. Unlike the others, I didn't run for the door. I scrambled up the stairs, pulling myself up with my hands as my feet tried to keep pace. I lost my fingernails, but I didn't care. I needed out. Rachel didn't move. She didn't so much as glance my way. I didn't have time to think about that. I reached the top of the stairs just as one of the creatures started up after me. I ran to the nearest bedroom and closed the door behind me. Running on pure adrenaline, I ripped open the window and climbed onto the roof. I stopped myself from jumping down. I was directly over the front door. I could see light spilling across the front yard. The door was open. Grabbing the gutter and praying it would hold, I pulled myself up above the window. I had just cleared the window when I heard the bedroom door shatter. I ran across the roof at a reckless speed. I didn't think, I just jumped. The house was on a hill. That fact might have been what saved me. I fell from what was probably 30 feet but landed on my butt on an incline. Rather than shattering my legs, I slid down the hill until my foot caught something and sent me tumbling headfirst through the ferns and brambles. Once I caught my foot again, I ran to the bottom of the hill. I found a road and followed it. At some point, I cried myself to sleep under a tree. I never went back. I didn't even pack my things. Somehow my car ended up back at my dorm. After searching it, I climbed in and drove 2 states back to my parents' house. I told them I flunked out and couldn't afford my dorm. They were mad, but I didn't care. I should have gone to therapy, but I felt like that would have been like admitting it was real. I just couldn't do it. I buried the memories by self-medicating. I lived by leeching off others for years before I started getting my life back together, before convincing myself that night had never happened. Dude, that was ridiculous. My brother's voice pulled me from my memories. My dream. I was back on the couch. Rachel was nowhere to be seen. Seriously, man. She's cute and all, but passing out because a girl talked to you? That's next level, bro. I sat up looking around. Where is she? I demanded. Chill, man. You probably freaked her out when you went all limp. Don't worry. Not only did I catch you and drag your heavy butt to the couch, I got a note from her. I ripped the paper from his hand. She took off pretty quick. She looked spooked. Anyways, I have to get going. Someone needs to pay the bills around here. I ignored him. My entire focus was riveted to the handwritten note. I'm sorry to barge into your life like this, but we need to talk. It's urgent. She left an address and said to be there Saturday by noon. I don't know what to do. My memories of that night have to be false. There was no police reports, no missing people. It had to have been in my head. Maybe Rachel can clear things up for me. Give me the closure I need. I needed closure. I had spent so long slogging through life because of what might have happened that night. I needed to know. I followed the instructions on Rachel's notes. Maybe I was being stupid. I didn't care. I was ready for this to end. The address she gave me was of an older home across town. It wasn't run down or giving off any massive red flags, but it was well past its prime. I walked up the worn concrete steps. I knocked on the front door. My heart was beating painfully. My anxiety was at a peak. Actually, I wasn't ready for this to end. I could happily live my life not knowing for sure. The door opened. Rachel stood there in sweatpants and a t-shirt. She looked disappointed to see me. "You came." There was a slight tremble to her voice. Her fists were clenched and she stood unnaturally stiff. Unsure of what to do, I just stood there, both of us looking at the other and neither speaking. Rachel shuddered, almost violently. It seemed to snap her out of her weird trance. She waved me forward before walking back inside. She left the door open. I wanted to close the door and go home, but I also wanted answers. And Rachel didn't seem to be doing so well. If she needed help, I couldn't just leave. Frustrated with myself, I followed her. None of the lights in the house were on. It was lit by some windows, but not very well. It had a dim atmosphere that put me off. My hand instinctively dropped to my waist. I felt the unfamiliar handle hidden under my shirt. It brought me some relief to know I wasn't helpless. That morning on my way to Rachel's, I made a pit stop at Walmart and bought the biggest cleaver I could find. Rachel was waiting in a bare room. She stood with her back to a hallway. There was no mistaking it. She was trembling to the point her knees were almost knocking together. I felt the surge of unholy energy swell up inside me. The tightening of my lower back, the lump in my throat. I hate suspense. Every speck of bravado fled my body. From the dark hallway behind Rachel emerged a single thick, wet tentacle. I got a better look this time. The top of it was a dark green and the bottom a lighter green. It looked very similar to the skin of a crocodile. A tear slipped down Rachel's face. Her bottom lip quivered as the tentacle slowly wrapped itself around her neck. With a sudden yank, Rachel was ripped off her feet and into the dark hallway. I fumbled for the cleaver. I needed to go. I got the cleaver out just as a figure revealed itself. My body locked up. I didn't know his name, but I recognized the guy from around town. 4 of those awful tentacles protruded from bloody holes in his shirt. He spoke. I don't know why I assumed he couldn't, but I had. "Welcome. You have been lost a very long time. Come, return to your home." I focused on not wetting myself. One of the tentacles reached out for me. It wasn't moving very fast, but it was enough to break my stupor and spur me into action. Dropping down, I grabbed the cleaver. I felt the thing try to grab my shoulder. I swung with everything I had. The cleaver cut into the tentacle. It wasn't a deep cut, but the monster recoiled in shock. The man snarled in disgust. "You dare refuse our offering?" The injured tentacle curled up against his body. The other 3 flailed wildly about the room. I tried to crawl away. The thing grabbed my leg. It squeezed so hard. I hacked at it, but it wouldn't let go. It flung me into the wall. My body ended up crashing all the way through it, and I landed dazed in another room. Tentacles began ripping away drywall and boards, enlarging the hole. I scrambled to my feet. My leg was bruised and didn't feel good, but I pressed on. I made it out the door before the thing got in. Doing my best to run, I finally made it to my car. The keys were missing. I had left them in the ignition just in case I had to make a quick getaway. I couldn't stay. That thing was coming. Getting out of the car, I made my way down the street. I turned down random alleys and hopped fences whenever I could. After a bit, I felt like I was somewhat safe. I hadn't seen anyone following me. I felt like I was going crazy. There was no way that all just happened. Those kids that were at the party where all this started weren't missing. I looked them up before going to meet Rachel. They were all living normal lives. This had to be a mental breakdown. After walking for an hour, the pain in my leg convinced me to call an Uber to get home. I pulled out my phone and saw I had 10 missed calls from my brother. Panic swept through me. He left a voicemail. Shaking, I opened it. "Yo, pick up your phone. That girl is here again." I called him back over and over, but it went straight to voicemail. Screw me. Now what? I couldn't go home. Even if this was all in my head, I couldn't get myself to trust Rachel. Not after what just happened. I took an Uber to the police station. I was going to tell them I saw someone breaking into the house. If they didn't see anything, then I would know it was all in my head. I paced in front of the building, probably looking suspicious. My whole body was a mess of nerves and anxiety. I couldn't stop moving. I just needed to get on with it. I was so deep in my own inner monologue, I hadn't noticed the female officer walking up until she spoke. "You doing all right there, bud?" I nearly jumped out of my own skin. "Hey now, I didn't mean to scare you. You've been out here a while. Everything okay?" It felt like I had just arrived. Was I losing track of time? Was she lying? Was I lying? My silence seemed to worry her. Her stance shifted ever so slightly from concern for me to concern for herself. I tried to force out the words, but they died in my throat as soon as I looked at the station. Standing inside, looking out one of the windows, was the man from the house. He was in a police uniform. I had to focus on literally not wetting myself. My guts twisted painfully and my heart did that thing where it painfully skipped a beat. I just got confused. I wasn't sure what I meant by that, but it's all I could get out. She looked at me quietly. I couldn't read her face. "I'm sorry. I need to go." I backed away, praying she wouldn't stop me. She glanced up at the man in the window before looking back to me. There was a question in her eyes, but I wasn't going to wait around for it. I hobbled as best I could down the street. No one stopped me or followed me. I didn't know what to do. If Rachel was dangerous, I couldn't leave my brother alone with her. But if what I suspected was true, and this was all a figment of my imagination, then maybe I was the dangerous one. Did I have some sort of undiagnosed mental illness? I couldn't go to the police. They would either lock me up for being insane or turn into monsters and tear me apart. Probably the first one. I needed to get things straight. I went over that night this all started. I hadn't drank much. Maybe my drink had been spiked. Possibly. But what about today? Just a mental snap from seeing Rachel again? But there was my obviously hurt leg. I should have recorded the meeting with Rachel. Then I would have had video proof of what happened. That's what I would do. I would go home and talk to Rachel while recording her, and my brother would be there as a witness. I started walking home. It wasn't terribly far, and I wanted the time to think. Sooner than I would have liked, I was at the steps to our house. I took a breath to steady myself before opening the door and walking in. The house was quiet. It threw me off. John always had music going or something on the TV. He hated the quiet. I tried to calm myself, but I could feel my heart beating painfully already. I almost walked right past it. In the kitchen sink, amongst all the dishes, was a towel. It had red splotches on it. It was blood. It was totally blood. I needed to chill. If it was blood, and it totally was, wasn't much. Definitely nothing life-threatening. I found John in the living room. He was sitting in his gaming chair. Well, not so much sitting as tied to it and gagged. I rushed forward. He mumbled furiously into the gag. Right before I reached him, I was blindsided by someone. I crashed onto the floor with them on top of me. It was Rachel. She forced her forearm against my throat and shoved her hand into my pocket. She pulled out my phone and jumped to her feet. I coughed for air while scrambling away from her. She put my phone in the microwave and turned it on. I nearly whimpered but managed to maintain my manhood momentarily. She walked up to me, squatting at my level. She shook her head in disappointment. I'll probably die for this, but it's my fault you got involved in the first place. She grabbed my shirt and pulled me to my feet. Then she flicked open a pocket knife and walked over to John. "Wait," I yelled out. She didn't stop. Using the knife, she cut the ropes holding him, then returned the knife to her pocket. John jumped to his feet. He was mad. Really mad. I could see the blood still trickling from his nose. He took a menacing step towards Rachel before she pulled a gun and pointed it at his head. "Both of you sit. We don't have much time. I'm going to catch you up as quick as I can, and then we need to move." I lost it. I just started yelling at Rachel. "Why do you have a gun? What is wrong with you? Get out of our house." I stepped towards her. Seemingly unfazed, she didn't even bother to take the gun off of John. "Dax, I'm not here to hurt you." I cut her off. "Then go. Drop the gun and leave." Surprisingly, it was John that calmed me down. "Relax, little bro. People don't smash you up, tie you to a chair, then let you go if they plan on hurting you. That kind of tactic is used by people that need someone to shut up and listen because all parties involved are in danger. So why don't you do that? Shut up and let her talk." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I sat next to John on the couch. Rachel put the gun back into the holster she had hidden in her waistband. "Your buddy is right. We're all in danger and really should be going as soon as possible." "He's my brother," I told her. I don't know why I felt the need to correct her. Rachel looked at John. There was no family resemblance between us. My skinny build and red hair had nothing in common with John's broad chest and curly black hair. "You remember John, right? He was deployed while I was in school." John nodded. "Yeah, I was speedrunning my way to a double purple medal while Jody was swinging by my place. Thanks for the lovely reminder." "See? He's a trained fighter." John let a joyless chuckle slip out. "Oh yeah, I'm real good at meg dumping at muzzle flashes while my friends turn into pink mist. Top-notch government training." He turned to Rachel. "Let's cut the crap. What did my brother get himself tangled up in?" Rachel glanced outside. "We can talk in the car. I'm sure they're on their way here." John groaned as he stood up. "Alright, let me grab my foot." While John retrieved his prosthetic from his room, I sat in awkward silence. Rachel kept checking different windows as well as her wristwatch. She suddenly ducked down. "They're here. This is bad." Just then John returned, shotgun in one hand and duffel bag in the other. I heard car doors slamming outside. "Get down," Rachel hissed at John. He glanced out the window before dropping to a knee. He shot me an annoyed look. "Seriously, Dax, what have you done?" I didn't know where to start, or even if we had time. Turns out we didn't. Something slammed into the front door. There were surprised grunts before more impacts rattled the door. I was real glad John had insisted on upgrading our deadbolt. I jumped as John yelled out, "Hey, identify yourself." The assault paused. John turned to the back door. From my angle, I could see the doorknob turning back and forth ever so slowly. Thank God we had locked it. John was thinking. That was probably his strongest feature. The dude was always playing four-dimensional chess while others were playing checkers. Reaching over, he grabbed Rachel's shirt and pulled her close. I couldn't hear what he said as he whispered to her. Rachel nodded, then made her way to me. We're going to get in the car and get out of here. He's going to meet up with us later. I tried to protest, but Rachel didn't give me a chance. Before I knew it, we were in the car counting down. Suddenly, Rachel floored it, and we went crashing through the garage door. I was surprised at how little damage it did to the car. There was a couple of shouts, but we were gone before anyone could do anything. I wanted to scream. I wanted to take it all out on Rachel. My life was flipped upside down and getting crazier every minute. I couldn't take much more of this. Rachel pulled onto the highway. Should we wait for John? I asked. Rachel gave me a strange look but didn't reply. I shoved her. Hey, we need to wait for John. Rachel turned to me. What? What are you talking about? I hesitated. Had I missed something? My brother, John, the one we left at the house. We need to wait for him so he can catch up. Rachel didn't say anything for a bit. Without looking at me, she said something that chilled me to my bones. Dax, you don't have a brother. Of course I have a brother. You just met him at our house. You know, right before you tackled me and broke my phone. I felt my face getting red. I was mad. Dax, you live alone. You have ever since you inherited your parents' house. No, that's not right. She cut me off. If I broke your phone, then what's in your pocket? I pulled my phone from my pocket. But that's not possible. You... She was crying now. Seriously, Dax. I want to help you and be your friend. Really I do, but you make it so hard sometimes. I don't know what's real right now. I need to get out of this car. I need some distance so I can think. The body in the trunk of my car is starting to stink. I expected it to take a lot longer, but I guess the heat accelerated the process. I should probably start at the beginning. It's been quite a night. It had been about 2 hours since we left my house. The more I thought about the events that had occurred, the less sense it made to me. I had childhood memories of John. He was my brother. I was sure of that. I'm not quite sure what Rachel had slipped into my pocket or pulled out of my pocket or whatever she did, but the phone in my hand isn't mine. Sure, everything on it was the same, almost like an exact clone, but the texture, the feel of it, it just wasn't quite right. Rachel spoke up. I know what you're thinking. You have these memories, you have all this going on, but you have to trust me. John isn't who you think he is. She stared ahead as she drove. These things, the tentacle monsters, not only can they imitate people, they have a little bit of telepathic abilities. They can mess with memories. They can even get a gist of what you're thinking. That's why I had to get you away from him. The more time you spend apart, the clearer your thoughts will be. Where are you taking me? I asked. I can't tell you, she said. Why not? I don't know how strong the connection is between you and that thing in your house. If I tell you where we're going, it might be able to get an idea and follow us there. In fact, I should probably blindfold you just so it can't guess where we are and attack us or ambush us. I was not okay with this idea. But as I had learned earlier, she could kick my butt, so there wasn't really a point in trying to refuse. Next thing I know, we were cruising down what I assume was still the highway. Me blindfolded, and her playing music on the radio. I had to get out of this car. I wasn't even sure where I was, but anywhere was better than in here. The car began to bump and make noises. We had pulled off the road. My heart began to beat wildly. This was it. This was either where I met my end, or where Rachel proved herself trustworthy. I took off the blindfold and looked around. Rachel smacked me in the arm. "Hey, put that back on." Her tone was less than friendly. "Why?" I asked. "If I don't know where we are, how could he know where I am by seeing what I see or seeing what I think I see? Or however that works." "Fine," she said. "Let's just get inside." There was another crappy looking house in front of us. I was not a fan of how things went down last time. I followed Rachel into a house. "Why don't I just stay in the car?" Rachel glared at me. It was clear that I was getting on her nerves. "Dax, get out of the car." I held up my hands, and before opening the door and stepping out, the yard was overgrown and the entire property was surrounded by trees. Behind us strung a long gravel driveway, and in front of me stood a small 2-story farmhouse with no windows or paint. Behind it, dilapidated-looking shed sat in the back. "Rachel?" I began. "This place gives me the creeps. What are we doing here?" She ignored me. She went to the back of the car and opened up the trunk. From inside, she removed a baseball bat and a roll of duct tape. I was officially freaked out. I started to back away and she pointed the bat at me. "Don't." I froze. "Rachel, what are you doing?" I asked slowly. She rested a hand on her hip and gave me an exasperated look. "Would you just calm down? Seriously, if I wanted to hurt you or kill you, wouldn't I have done it already? I've been risking myself to keep you alive, okay? A little gratitude would go a long way." I wasn't sure if I believed her. Actually, no, I was pretty sure I didn't believe her. But I didn't have much of a choice either, and figured if I played along, she was more than likely to let me live a little longer. I don't know what she had going on with these tentacle monsters, but I was not a fan of this situation. Rachel caught me off guard when she threw the baseball bat to me. I caught it, and I eyed her suspiciously. "What's this for?" "What do you think it's for? In case something comes at you, you can whack it between the eyes. I've got my handgun, but there's only the one, and I'm sure not going to give it up." "And the duct tape?" I asked. "It'll come in handy later. First, let's get settled in. We're going to spend the night here, and then take off again come morning." Once again, I was thrown for a loop. On the one hand, Rachel was saying unbelievable things that I couldn't fathom. But on the other hand, she just handed me a weapon, and told me to defend myself if I needed to. If she was out to deliver me to a tentacle monster, if she was one herself, why would she give me something to fight back with? But if she wasn't, and she was actually on my side trying to help me, that meant, well, I didn't really want to think about what that meant. Inside the house was as desolate and worn as the outside, all except one room. There was a bedroom in the back of the house that had a bed, a couch, and some other odds and ends. Clearly somebody had been using it for sleeping quarters. "Have you been living here?" I asked. Rachel shook her head. "No, but I set it up in case I ever needed to." "In case something like this happened?" I asked. She simply nodded. "Where have you been? Like, what happened to you? How did you end up in all this?" I flung my hands around. Rachel sighed. She sat on the bed and rested her head on her hands. She looked tired, more than just physically tired. She looked aged and worn. "I guess I owe you some sort of explanation, huh?" She looked up at me and made an attempt at a smile before giving up. "That night, The one where I invited you over to watch a movie? That wasn't the first night something like that happened. I know that this is going to sound horrible, and rightfully you'll be mad, but what happened to me before, I just didn't think it was real. She was quiet for a bit, just looking at the blank wall. I wasn't really much of a social person before college. I was a bit sheltered. A couple guys asked me to come hang out at a party. I figured why not. I kind of knew them. We'd seen each other at class. We talked. We even hung out once before. Well, one thing led to another. People kept giving me shots, and that led to ripping on a bong and then taking some hits of acid. I was pretty messed up. At least I think I was. I had never not been sober before. So when some of the people in the group started backing up against walls, I just kind of zoned out. Even when, well, you know, even when they exploded those things out, I just stood there. I didn't move. I didn't react. I just stood there. They grabbed people, held them down, and God, and they forced their mouths open and shoved those weird egg-like embryo things into their throats. She shuddered at the memory. I don't really remember what happened after that. I just know I woke up on the floor and everybody around me was making fun of me for being a lightweight. I want to say that everybody was the same, but they weren't. There were red flags that I should have paid attention to. There was little things that didn't quite fit, but I didn't want to see. I wanted it all to be a dream. I wanted it to be fake. I didn't want to have to deal with the thought of it being real. So I ignored it, and now you are paying the price. I thought about her story for a while. It sounded plausible enough. Unfortunately, believing her meant that I would have to face the fact that everything that I experienced the last 2 days actually happened. But I guess I was going to have to deal with that at some point anyways. Rachel looked completely worn out. She looked older than I remembered. Even from when she had come to my door 2 days ago, she seemed to have aged. So when she lay down on the bed and rolled facing away from me, I didn't bother her. I just sat on the sofa and contemplated all the crap I had gone through. If I hadn't been sitting there awake, I never would have heard the footsteps on the gravel outside. My first thought was the gun in Rachel's waistband, but it was shoved down the front of her pants and there was no way I was grabbing it without waking her. Nor did I trust her enough to wake her up and tell her that there might be somebody outside. So I did the next best thing. I grabbed a baseball bat and made my way out of the bedroom. The house was pitch black. Nothing was moving except the shadows of the trees outside. The moon let off with light to navigate by. The sound had since stopped, but I was certain of what I had heard. Bat held firmly, I made my way to the door. I winced with each creak of the floorboards, the sound seemingly deafening in the eerie silence. My arms were trembling and my throat felt light. It was difficult to breathe, which was not helping my anxiety. My heartbeat was audible, but at least it was steady if a bit fast. I reached out to the front door. It glided open without a sound. Stepping outside, I looked around the overgrown lawn. There was just enough of a breeze to stir the tall, dead grass. Each time it rustled, I swore there was something moving inside it. I hesitated to step down from the front porch. Irrationally, I felt like something was going to grab me from beneath and pull me under. Maybe it wasn't irrational. Gritting my teeth, I jumped from the porch. Mid-air, I spun around with the bat held high. Under the porch was vacant. I sighed in relief. I wanted to go back inside, to just ignore what I had heard, but I knew that wasn't the right option. So I pushed forward. I walked alongside the house, careful to scan the area before moving on. I circled the house without incident. I was starting to calm down. Perhaps the entire thing had been in my head. The only place left to check was the shed. I was painfully aware of how loud the dry grass crunching under my feet was. There was no way anything hiding in there wouldn't know I was coming. I tentatively tugged on the door. It was stuck tight. The ground had swelled, locking the door in place. That was all I needed. The coast was clear. I turned back to the house. Screw me sideways. Standing next to the house was a figure. Its identity was hidden by the shadow being cast by the house itself. We both stood there watching one another. I raised the bat. "Who's there?" I tried to sound authoritative, but it came out as an almost unintelligible squeak. The figure came closer. It had a familiar hobble to its stride. Even before he stepped into the moonlight, I knew it was John. I gasped when I saw him. His hair was matted down. He had a head wound that I could see even at a distance. His left eye was swollen nearly shut. His clothes were torn and stained, and he was missing his prosthetic foot. "All right, we're going to get out of here, and then I'm going to kick your butt for dragging me into this crap." I was frozen. John was the last person I had expected to see. He still held his shotgun, but it wasn't pointed at me. I tried to think back to my memories of him and I growing up. Was he really my brother? Was Rachel the one lying? I had memories. There was no doubt about that. But they weren't as clear as they should have been. Or maybe they were. John wasn't around much. He was 5 years older, and we didn't hang out a lot growing up. He was getting impatient. "Let's go, Dax. Where's that B word at?" I didn't like him calling Rachel that, but it fit with the character I thought I knew. "She's inside sleeping." He glanced at the house behind him. "And is she one of those squid things?" I took a step back. "How do you know about that?" He growled. "Take a look around. 2 of them came in after that girl took you and tried to violate me. It didn't go well for them. No more talking. Let's get out of here." I saw movement behind John. It was Rachel. She raised her gun up, pointing it at the back of his head. I yelled out, "No, Rachel, don't!" John spun around and leveled the shotgun at Rachel. "Guys, please," I begged. "Both of you put the guns down." John snorted. "So she can squid me? No thanks. She ain't cute enough to pull that off." "You know you can't trust him, Dax. Let's get out of here before the rest show up." John looked offended. "He can't trust me? I've been looking out for him his entire life. Dax, who gave you a place to live? Who drove you to interviews? Bailed you out of the drunk tank?" My head hurt. I had so many memories pushing and pulling. Some I knew were fake, others were convincing. But I now knew who was manipulating me. "Well?" John demanded. "Are you going to pick some girl over family?" I walked up to John. I knew what needed doing. "Give me the gun, John." He looked shocked. Rachel must have sensed what I was up to. I saw her finger drop onto the trigger. I threw my shoulder into John, knocking us both to the ground. A bullet whizzed over us. John swung the shotgun over and fired a single shot. Blood and gore blasted across the wall behind Rachel. She dropped her gun and fell to her knees. She clamped both hands around the grisly mess that used to be her neck. The terror and betrayal in her eyes froze me. John was back on his feet, his face as cold as stone. He grabbed me by my shirt and pulled me past Rachel. She had dropped to her hands and knees. The noises she was making would stick with me forever. Blood poured freely from between her fingers as she gurgled for air. My ears were ringing and my head was so clouded I couldn't focus. John had me in the car and back on the road in no time. I felt vomit rising inside me. I barely got the window open in time. I felt John's hand pat me on the back. Hang in there, little bro. Just breathe. We've been driving for hours. I don't know where we're going. My memories of John have grown clear while those of Rachel are fuzzy. I want to sleep, but every time I close my eyes, I see her face. And I learned why our car was starting to smell. John had the bodies of 2 of those things in the trunk. He's got some sort of plan. At least I hope he does, because I sure don't. John thinks we should ditch the car, our phones, and even our clothes, so I don't know if I'll be updating again. Stay safe out there. There is a pond on the edge of my town behind a large willow. I've never seen it being used. I've never seen a duck swimming in it, or even leaves or other sea creatures, let alone people taking a bath or just dipping their feet in it. Every time I passed by the pond, it was like walking past a ghost town. It was eerie to see how deserted it was, how the water surface remained still and smooth as glass, even during windy weather conditions. But despite the strange power emanating from it, I couldn't help but admire its purity and beauty. When I stopped in front of the pond with my bike for the first time, my gaze was captivated. I stared at the oval outline, the reflection of the surface, the plants growing on the bank, and the dusk that shone colorfully on the horizon and rounded off the beauty of the pond. I'm sure I sound crazy for wasting so much time and emotion describing a pond. Even my parents thought I was crazy when I raved about it one night at the dinner table. But it's important that I tell you about it, considering what happened 3 weeks ago. I was on my way to school when I saw an ambulance drive past me. It was heading straight for the edge of town and turned into the grassy area where the willow was. I didn't think anything of it at first and went to school as normal. In the afternoon, during the last lesson, we were all surprised when our school principal made an announcement and said that we should watch out on the way home or have our parents pick us up. That was all that was said. On the way out, I heard students everywhere throwing around theories and rumors. I often heard missing student, disappeared, and murdered. But there were also really nonsensical things, so I didn't pay any attention to them at first. My father came and picked me up just to be sure. I was surprised because he was still supposed to be at work and would only pick me up in the worst case scenario. However, I dismissed it as a good gesture from a parent and didn't think much of it. I was a little worried about my girlfriend Rachel though, because she would probably expect me to take her home, but my father insisted that I get into the car without arguing. I did as I was told. When I brought up the subject of the principal's announcement at the dinner table that evening, everyone suddenly became quiet. My parents looked at each other worriedly. I sat up curiously and asked, "Do you know more about it? Does it have something to do with the ambulance this morning?" My mother sipped her tea and said, "It turns out that student from your school went missing this morning. It is believed that he was kidnapped because his bag was found, but I don't think that's enough evidence." I swallowed hard and finally asked where the bag was found. My mother replied that it happened on the outskirts of the town next to the big willow. I would like to justify myself and make it clear that I was 16 years old at the time, and still in the phase where I would try anything. If someone had bet me that I could ride a skateboard across a dilapidated bridge, I probably would have done it. My thirst for adventure was too great for that. When I finally found out that someone had disappeared at the pond, I knew I had to go to the scene myself. Luckily, there was no school the next day, so I rode my bike to the outskirts of town. I had told my parents I would stop by Rachel's house and check on them. They were still fresh out of bed, so they probably weren't too concerned about it. But I also felt bad that I hadn't gone to visit Rachel, so I decided to go to her house straight after my explorations. When I arrived at the pond, I saw that the crime scene had been removed. There was no bag, and the whole area around the willow was as green and unused as ever. I saw no change at the pond either. It couldn't be possible that the missing student was in the water, otherwise he would have been found immediately. I dared to step onto the bank and take a closer look. The water was clearer than the sky could ever be, and offered a clear view of what was happening in the ground. Here and there roots were sticking out, and you could see the loose rocks that had probably been thrown in. Otherwise, the entire ground was just sand. Sand like in a desert, wavy, hilly, and smooth, almost untouched. The view of the pond was simply majestic. I had the urge to reach in and see if the water would feel as great on my skin, but I was stopped by a loud scream in the background. I pulled my hand away and turned around. A person emerged from behind the willow. She was about my age, well dressed, and her brown hair looked like she had been combing it 100 times non-stop. Rachel. She came straight up to me and raised her finger like a strict teacher. Where have you been yesterday? A classmate went missing and I had to walk home alone. Is that how you treat your girlfriend? Rachel has always been very hot-tempered and could be quite bossy. But at that moment, I was overcome with shame. I really should have gone to see her the day before and walked her home. I really didn't know what I was thinking. I apologized to Rachel and was about to embrace her, but she pushed me away. You can make it up to me by taking me home now. But first, you stop at the mall and get me something. I nodded vigorously and promised to make it up to her. I hated acting like that, but Rachel just had this power that made you feel bad for yourself. My mother had brought it up to me once, but I didn't want to listen to her because I had just gotten together with Rachel, and I was head over heels in love with her. What are you even doing here? Rachel asked. I had completely forgotten why I was here at that moment, but I didn't want to tell her about the connection I possibly found between the pond and the missing student because she would think I was crazy. So I just told her that I was here to feed the ducks. Rachel laughed. There aren't even ducks here. This pond has just been a decoration for ages, so the lawn doesn't look so deserted. But it's so beautiful. You have to look at it and see how clear it is, I said, a little too excited for my liking. Rachel eyed me confusedly too. Without raising her eyebrows any further, I instead took her hand and led her to the shore. I asked her to take a look, which she did. Don't you see how clear the water is? As if you're looking into a portal where a beautiful desert landscape is visible, right? I thought Rachel would at least understand what I was trying to say, or just shrug her shoulders and leave, but her reaction was more than surprising. She frowned and recoiled slightly, as if she had seen something strange. What's that? She said, stammering. Then she looked at me. Is this some kind of joke? I stood there rooted to the spot, feeling guilty for some reason. I knew it was just Rachel's persuasive ability to make me feel bad, but I was genuinely curious as to what she was getting at. Can't you see that? She asked louder this time. I did as she told me and looked into the water too, albeit a little hesitantly, eager to see what had frightened her so much. But I saw nothing, just the clear water with the sandy bottom. I told Rachel I didn't see anything and she hit me on the head. Don't act like that. Of course you can see it. She turned back to the surface and screamed at her own reflection. No, stop that. I've said you must stop. Now. I felt a mixture of confusion and panic. I really didn't know what Rachel was doing, but at that moment all I cared about was her well-being. Her behavior came out of nowhere and was so strange that I really wondered if she was still the Rachel I had come to know and love. Just as I was about to grab her and pull her away from the edge, something happened that would haunt me for the rest of my life like a recurring nightmare. Rachel reached for the water as if she wanted to attack it and sank into the pond. Even though the area near the bank was less than 3 feet deep, I couldn't see her when she hit the surface. The water was crystal clear. Panicking, I dug my hands into the water and searched for my girlfriend. I couldn't feel any hands, feet, or even a strand of her hair. She didn't make a sound. Aside from my hands splashing in the water and my desperate screams, the pond was dead silent. I jumped inside, stopped thinking about the mysterious strength of the pond, and dug my hands and feet deep into the sand, searching in vain for Rachel. The sand felt incredible on my skin. After 20 minutes, I had waded through the entire pond and had no luck. Rachel was gone. I got out of the pond and sobbed. I didn't know what to do. My only thought was how Rachel's parents would take the news that their daughter had disappeared without a trace. I still hoped that she would mysteriously turn up somewhere. I didn't care how unlikely it seemed. I wanted to hold on to that tiny spark of hope. I got on my bike and hurried away from the pond, away from the willow. My mind, however, worked on its own and made my head turn back once more. Despite the great distance I had covered, the pond was still clearly in my field of vision, piercing my heart with its heavenly appearance. After the incident with Rachel at the pond, everything that came afterwards happened so quickly. I told Rachel's parents about her disappearance, trying to explain everything as plausibly as possible, without mentioning that the pond had literally swallowed her. I also left myself out of the picture and limited my part to a random witness so that the investigation would not target me. It hurt my heart, but it was for the best. All of this happened 3 weeks ago, and Rachel is still missing. She has never been seen since the incident at the pond. Going to school became a nightmare. All I heard was Rachel's name. There were many expressions of condolence. Many of her friends came to me, hugged me, and had assured me that she would return safely, which I strongly doubted. But I also heard very negative voices about Rachel's absence, that she deserved it, that the world would be better off without her, etc. I had seen this coming because Rachel didn't exactly have a good reputation among us students. I ignored the people as best I could, and with each passing day the excitement died down a little. The school dedicated a day to commemorate the events. This has never happened before, but it was a very special case, as 2 students had disappeared at the same time. I also finally found out who the first missing person was, and I was actually a little relieved when I heard his name. His name is Riley, and he is one of those students who thinks it's cool to bully others. He has often caused younger students to see the nurse, and has never been seriously punished for it. I would have at least been somewhat understanding of his behavior if he had a difficult home life. But I've heard from friends that he grew up in wealthy circles, and his parents are the kind of people who defend their child at all costs. So it was no surprise when they recently planned to sue our school for poor protection measures. The lawsuit is still ongoing, but I don't see much hope for Riley's parents. Now Rachel and Riley were gone. Both were victims of an extraordinary perpetrator. And now I have only one question. What did they see in the pond that sealed their fate? And why couldn't I see it? Today I rode my bike up to the willow again, simply because my instinct told me to. But I didn't get very far because the pond was fenced off with barrier tape. At least it wouldn't claim any more victims in the future. I've always been a rather rational person, and never believed in things like karma, but lately I've been hearing this word from a lot of people, even from my mother. I try to ignore it, as much as I can, but there's a part of my mind that just wouldn't stop telling me that Rachel has always been a bad person and a horrible girlfriend. For so long through middle school, we used to venture out into the woods, and one day we came across this oddity. Michael thought it was being used to grow weed. Patrick thought it was just an abandoned hunter's post. But if it was abandoned, then why did it have a padlock on it? My friend Carlson speculated it was used by human traffickers. We all had wild theories about what may have been behind the doors of that ominous shed in the middle of the woods. And multiple times we said that we were going to bust in and see what it was for ourselves. And every time we ended up getting cold feet. However, school was ending, summer was approaching, and we would all be going our separate ways as Michael was moving and Carlson was going to a different school. We were all trying to decide on what we would do with our last days together, and we all had the answer in the back of our minds. We were going to put the mysterious shed behind us and see for ourselves what was in it once and for all. After school, we grabbed some water and our bikes and rode out for the portion of the woods we usually ride around and play in. It was a noon dismissal, so we had plenty of time to figure out what was in that shed and go about the rest of our last day together. The journey was uneasy. I don't know if it was the sadness of knowing that our friends were going away, the excitement of solving an age-old mystery, or if it was something else entirely. I would almost call it a sense of dread, but what was so scary about a creepy tool shed in the middle of the woods? Finally, after about 20 minutes, we arrived. The small metal structure stood like a sentinel against the overgrowth that had encroached upon it, bearing marks from animals attempting to get in. Carlson took out a pair of pliers to cut the rusted chains around the doors. I still can't believe your dad let you use that. He didn't let me. He was just too drunk to see me take it. With a snap, the rusted chains gave way and fell to the ground. The doors began to swing open, and I could almost hear the sound of everyone's heart pumping in anticipation. The doors swung open to nothing but a small writing desk and a hatch that led further underground. Well, this was disappointing, Patrick blurted out. Come on, guys, there has to be something interesting in here. Maybe check the drawers for some lost cash. We looked around and all we found were notes, too time-worn to make out any sentences and symbols. We were about to leave when Carlson opened the hatch. We looked down and saw a ladder that descended onto a concrete stone floor. Dude, this is getting creepy. I shared Michael's sentiment. Whatever is down there was something we were never meant to see. Come on, guys, we came here to do a job and... let's see what all the hype was about. I'm going down. Carlson said brave and foolhardy. Upon seeing he didn't die instantly, his courage became infectious and we all descended downwards into the dark cellar. It was cold, unnaturally so. None of us had brought our flashlights, so we had to waste precious phone battery and use the flashlight apps. A single stone corridor stretched out into an almost infinite hallway with doors on each side of the hall. None of the doors had windows, so we couldn't see what might have been occupying these foreboding chambers. Dude, this is starting to get creepy. Maybe we should head up. Head up if you want, but this is starting to get interesting. Carlson went to open one of the vaults, even though we urged him not to. Surprisingly, the doors opened. They were not locked or rusted shut. Carlson had nothing to say, but stood there silently looking into the room. When we all joined him, we could see what he was staring at. It was a skeleton, and it looked to be in the shape of a man, but with the skull of a deer, antlers and all. Maybe it was a hunter. Nobody bought that. Whatever we were looking at wasn't the skeleton of a human, that's for sure. The other rooms we opened were similar, but some had more skeletons. Some had dresses made of animal fur that were ruined and writhing with insect larvae. Some had fashion jewelry that looked like it came from rocks and animal bones. The stench of it was becoming unbearable, so finally we made it to the final door at the end of the hallway. As we opened it, we saw that it wasn't another cell, but a laboratory of sorts. Beds with straps and restraints, another writing desk with a human skeleton in the chair, and a shelf that still had vials of odd color liquids. Upon further investigation, we found a notebook, one that wasn't so tattered, and we used our flashlights to read through the contents. 13th of October, 2001. We had been getting reports of strange sightings in the woods. People report bipedal deer stalking them, and reporting the sightings as close to town as the edge of the woods. The police and state park have been notified. 16th of October, 2001. A boy went missing in the woods and was found by a collaboration of police and state park rangers. He was found with his insides torn out in a puddle of gore. That's when we found the animal that had attacked him. A bipedal deer as described by the townsfolk. It took a lot of bullets to kill it, and we didn't know who to call this into. We called the CDC for fear it may be carrying a disease. 19th of October, 2001. The CDC has passed this case down to an unnamed government branch who wants to set up a surveillance in the woods. We aren't being told anything, however, as a wildlife ranger. They wanted me with them to help chart the area. I have a bad feeling about this. 25th of October, 2001. They began construction on an underground facility. Well, when I saw begun, I mean they took an old bomb shelter that belonged to a John Doe and converted it into a laboratory. We have named these creatures the Voracious. Probably a play on the fact these creatures seem entirely driven by the need to feed. What gets me is how human they look, and the fact they seem to possess some language, but we don't know what it means, nor do we have references in any known language. 1st of November, 2001. I had to sign an NDA about everything that happens in my time here. They finally let me into the laboratory they had set up, where they were doing horrific experiments upon the Voracious. Their teeth are razor sharp, and we have no idea how many there are in the woods, but speculate they have been here for a long time. A very long time. Our phone's batteries were getting low, and the lights were starting to flicker. We all decided to go back up. The run-down hallway was terrifying, seeing as how I was expecting a door to fly open, and those monsters to pop out at me at any moment. We all made it to the surface and bolted out of the shed as fast as possible. Even though it was broad daylight, I still felt like we were being watched from every angle. The treetops, the thickets. I couldn't wait to get out of those woods. We reached the houses and made a silent vow to never talk about what we found in the shed. I, however, kept the book and continued to read through the notes. They were unremarkable, only detailing the ranger's ascension of authority the more he worked on this case, until I reached the final entry. 1st of December, 2001. We heard gunfire and screaming coming from the grounds outside. They have us surrounded. There must be dozens of them. Where did they all come from? I hope whoever finds this journal can help spread the truth that there is something evil in these woods. Cannibalistic fiends they are. Fire is their only known weakness. I can hear them clawing at the shed above. The rest of the text is ineligible from water stains, probably from tears. I am in high school now, and to this day I still refuse to go into the woods. I still set my own curfew before sundown, and I still hear stories about people who go into the woods and never come back. And some nights, when I look out my window into the dark woods, bloodshot eyes stare back at me.